Hi, I'm Trip Abbott, and this is the second video of this YouTube playlist of looking at old versus new management thinking. And you can get to this playlist by going to the 95method.com/old versus VS new. And that way you can connect with it. You'll see as I add videos in there, and obviously, if you subscribe and hit the bell, you will be notified of future videos that I have on this particular subject. So when we're talking about old versus new management thinking, we're primarily talking about the old thinking being from Frederick Taylor and what some people call Taylorism, still taught in a majority of universities today, versus newer management thinking or new management thinking, which is the work of W. Edwards Deming. And they contrast in a number of ways, and that's why I wanted to go through the series. And then adding on top of that, some of the things I've done in my belief that furthering the work of W. Edwards Deming as a foundation, some of the things I'm doing with what I call the 95 method. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of different things. One is, first of all, this concept of the individual versus the system, and we'll talk about that. And then the second thing we'll talk about is how Taylor and Deming viewed the individual and their role in it, because it really drives into individual versus systems from that standpoint. Now, Douglas McGregor wrote The Human Side of Enterprise in 1960, long after Frederick Taylor wrote the Principles of Scientific Management. So he didn't have the knowledge of McGregor's theory X and theory Y, but it comes into play. I think it's a good way to explain things on a very fundamental scale of the difference between how Taylor and Deming looked at the worker. So starting with Taylor, he would have been more of what we would call, or McGregor would have called, theory X. And the worker, they dislike their work, little motivation, and it requires constant, authoritarian type of rule. And in today's world, we would call this micromanagement. That somebody's always looking you over your shoulder, got to, be on top of everything that you do. And he also believed that you could get more from the individual by using motivation, by using this micromanagement, by separating out from a control standpoint the management of the work versus the doing of the work. And as it plays out, as I read the Principles of Scientific Management, Taylor uses words multiple times saying that the worker is stupid, that an intelligent gorilla is greater than a worker. Now, consider that the work was moving pig iron from the floor to a trailer. So there, it was a lot of physical types of work that was going on. But Taylor, another word that he uses quite often in the Principles of Scientific Management is soldiering, which is this concept that the worker is lazy, that they are unmotivated, looking for ways to kind of get out of work all the time. And so this is the foundation that Frederick Taylor built. Now, again, I've mentioned before Frederick Taylor and what he did in getting rid of inefficiencies in 1911 with his book, and prior to it, was really notable. He was the guru of the day. And so it was an advancement for the time period. Now, if we look at Taylor's view of things today, we'll see that, we've seen things like rank and yank. that the problem really is bad people in our organization, that's what we need to focus on, and they need to be micromanaged and rated and all of the things that go along with kind of a Tayloristic view. And ranking them from 1 to 1,000, however large your organization is. So that was Taylor's view. Now Deming would take more of McGregor's theory Y. Now he had some of the benefit, though he started developing his theories earlier than 1960, but in essence, he started to pull it all together in 1980. So you did have the benefit of McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. Well, Theory Y is almost the opposite, or can be viewed as the opposite of Theory X, which is that the view of the worker is that they're self-motivated, that they use their own initiative, and they are involved in the decision making. They get to participate in making decisions about their work. And so this contrast is something that, interestingly enough, even today, I see more of Taylor's type of management than I do of Deming's, and Theory X greater than Theory Y. People need to be rated and micromanaged and those types of things to a degree, and some of them are a mix of things. It's very interesting as you work with different organizations, but Deming believed that performance was less from the individual and more from the system. So he viewed that if you make the system better, that that will address a lot of the problems with the workers. That's not to completely negate what the worker's role is in the system, but in essence, that's where his focus was. And he used the phrase 94% of the performance of the organization is down to the system that you work in. Now, this prompted me to build what I call the 95 method. So I took it a little bit further and basically said 95% of the performance of an organization is down to the theory or down to the system that you work in, and 5% is attributable to the individual special events, special causes. And the special causes actually mean something I'll get into in later videos. But so Deming contrasts that from Taylor. Completely different mindsets and thoughts. And like I said, today you'll see a lot of mixture of the two. Now, the 95 method then is Theory Y, or Deming's view, plus some changes that I see are important. One is, you have to develop your synthetic thinking in order to understand how your system operates, and the theories at work in your thinking, how your customer views your organization. But that motivation and control are key leverage points in your organization. And that decision making, as opposed to Deming saying participating, or in Taylor's case, get the worker out, management needs to make all the decisions, is that you have the knowledge of the work. So I take it a little bit, it's a nuance, but it plays out rather largely from a standpoint of, as an executive, it's hard for you to make decisions about work that you don't understand. And yet I see it all the time, right? You get a spreadsheet and, we'll just do this. And that's very dangerous. And so getting knowledge of the work is very important, and that management's job is to remove the barriers for experimentation. Now, this doesn't mean that the worker goes out and blows up your whole system because they had a theory. It means that we're very methodical about the things that we try, and in most cases, in 90% plus of the time, you will have the opportunity to experiment with your system and giving the workers the freedom to experiment if they're doing it on a small scale and communicating what they're doing. So then we can find new ways of being able to make the system that you're working in better for customers. And how do we facilitate that? By different thinking that we have about control and motivation. So the system is the focus of the 95 method, that 95% of the performance comes from that, and that you need to develop, in order to become an effective executive, your synthetic thinking kind of as the foundational component of what's being taught in my executive education program. So develop that synthetic thinking by looking through a customer lens, looking through the thinking lens to understand what you think about motivation, what do you think about motivation, and what do you think about control. I'll have further videos on other subjects in contrasting Taylor versus Deming and what the 95 method helps facilitate in upcoming YouTube videos. Please subscribe. You'll be notified if you hit the bell of the future videos that as I release them.